Hello everyone, this video will cover Module 14. So Module 14 is the main module that will cover our world myths. You had Egyptian myths in the previous module, and then in the next module you'll have an exam over the world myths. It'll be a much shorter exam than what we've done before. So this module is kind of the main one where we'll be discussing these world myths. So we'll tie in some of the Egyptian myths from the previous module, but this one will center around three myth traditions: Polynesian, Chinese, and Native American. So there is a lot of information for you. The main thing is to get in here and read the myths themselves. So the Polynesian myth page, all of them kind of look the same. I've got some videos linked in for you that are optional, kind of additional resources that are not required but may help you to understand them a little bit better. And then I have the link. The first thing will be the link to the actual myth that I want you to read. So this one, Legend of Maui, is very long. You can kind of see it goes through, and then there's actually more parts to it. The first part is where the majority of the questions will come from, but you may want to kind of skim through the rest of them. There are quite a few stories involving Maui, and this will just kind of give you some ideas of what he was like as a god. This is the longest one that we have links to, but it definitely is something that you want to be looking over. So that's the story of Maui for our Polynesian gods. For the Chinese myth, we have probably the most famous myth in China, which is the legend of the cowherd and the weaver girl. It is associated with Chinese Valentine's Day, and so there are a lot of variations to this story. There's actually a Japanese variation of the story as well. It's kind of interesting to see the cultural differences between the two. But basically what you're going to do is, this is the link to the story itself, which I want you to read, and then and it kind of gives you some different kind of classic Chinese folklore tales, and then some more information about the festival itself, and then the stars that it's associated with. It's kind of interesting. We get that parallel with some of the stories that we've read so far that have some kind of a tie to constellations and things like that. And then this is the story. And I've got two videos linked in. This is a TED Ed kind of animated version. And then if you really are interested, this one is just a fantastic opera version of the story, which is very dramatic. And if you like any kind of old Chinese theater, you'll really enjoy that video. And I also have another link to just more of the astronomy associated with it, because we have a lot of our stories associated with constellations. Obviously the constellation was in the sky first, and then the story came afterward, and so seeing that connection is really interesting. That's not part of the stuff that will be tested though. And then your last myth that you're going to look at is from the Native American tradition, and that is called Coyote and the Origins of Death. The story of Coyote. Coyote is a very common character, even throughout multiple traditions. So Native American mythology is really hard to define just in general. There's so much to it because there's so many different tribes, and based on where they were geographically, they have different associations with things, but a lot of them tended to have ties to nature, and so most of their gods were animals, or in animal form, and Coyote is one of the characters that shows up in multiple different traditions. And so he's kind of interesting. He's their trickster god, probably the most well-known of the gods from the Native American tradition. And so this is just one of his stories. There are many, many stories, but this is a nice short one for you to read. And then I've got a link here to a video that just kind of goes over Coyote as a trickster, and ties to Raven, who is also another trickster god from the Native American tradition. And I have a link here if you're just interested in seeing kind of the tribal, how it was divided up and some of the similarities between the different tribes. So once you've gone through all of that, the next thing you'll do, you'll first want to take the greetings quiz. The greetings quiz does go over all 4 traditions. So Egyptian from the previous unit, and then these 3 from this unit. I went ahead and included Egyptian in there, even though it's the module 14 readings quiz, just so you get some practice with those questions, because these are all the kinds of questions that will be on the exam in the next module. So that'll give you just an overview of it. And then the last thing that you'll do is the World Myth Discussion Board, and this is just kind of giving you a chance to look at world myths in general. We only have 4, technically 4 myths that we're looking at, and so there's such a wealth of mythology out there that we don't get to cover. And so what I want you to do for this discussion board is find a new myth that we have not looked at before. And I don't want you to use a Norse or a Greek one either, because we have spent a lot more time on those traditions. I would really like for you to look beyond that. So there's so many different kind of tribal traditions that you can look at, or you can even look at like Celtic mythology, Irish mythology, or Irish folklore. They can be folklore, traditions, legends, that kind of thing as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be divine myth with gods in it. But you can kind of look around. A whole bunch of like South American traditions are really interesting. So the Inca and the Maya, Aztecs, they have some really strong mythologies as well. And there's a lot out there that you could do. So what you're going to do is you're going to find an actual myth, so an actual story that you want to post, copy and paste a link to the myth, summarize the story within a couple of sentences, so just kind of an overview, and then an analysis of it. Do a short analysis of it, about 8 to 10 sentences. Really, we're just thinking about like what's archetypal about it. So that would be like what sort of things do you see that you see in other myths? So what are kind of the types of gods, types of places, types of objects, that kind of thing. And what do they mean? What are they supposed to represent? And then I also want you to discuss a little bit of why you think the culture created the myth. So is it trying to explain a phenomena, or maybe it's part of their moral tradition or something like that. And then your response post, you're going to pick 2 peers posts, and you have 3 options for how to respond, and you only need to do 1 of the 3 for each of your response posts. Otherwise, you just like, that would be like too much work. So I'm expecting you to just do 1 of these 3 things. You can first make a comparison to a myth that we actually read in the class. So if they post, say, the creation story from the Aztecs, maybe you compare that to the creation story from the Norse tradition or something like that. So you're going to provide a link to the myth that you're referring to, that you're comparing it to. So it may be a link to, a story of Osiris from the Egyptian myth, or we may be a link to or maybe just page numbers of the textbook, and then discuss the comparison between the 2. So about 10 sentences. Or if you prefer, you can find out more about that culture. So if they have posted a myth from the Aztecs, then you would find out more about the Aztec culture, and you would post 1 or 2 sources that just has additional information about their culture and explain your sources. Or your third option is to find a visual representation of the myth and link it in. It may be a video or artwork. This might be a little bit more difficult if they've chosen a myth that is not widely known. There may not be a visual representation, in which case you would have to do 1 of these other 2. But if there is, then you provide a video, maybe a link to some artwork, something like that, and explain the visual, how it ties into the myth and that kind of thing. The only thing is you cannot duplicate something. So if you see that somebody has already posted a source, you can't use that same source to post. So 3 posts, and this will be the majority of the writing requirements for our world myth discussion. So that is the world myth unit. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, we are almost done with the semester. Next module will be the world myth exam, and we'll be pretty close to the end of the class. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great week.